Navigating ADHD in the workplace is highly misunderstood and unfortunately stigmatized. Managers are so quick. If they hear ADHD, they think disorganized, disruptive,
unable. We know probably that the majority of the entrepreneurs and people successful in business are actually ADHD, more than likely.
Here's your job description. That tells you what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Let's rip up the job description and let's go about this in a person-centered way. And that's not actually, when you boil it down, about neurodiversity, is it? That's just about playing to strengths.
Humans generally, it's a lifelong challenge of struggling with identity. I think it is just so important to be able to advocate for yourself and what you need to get the best out of you in a workplace. Your managers, they can't mind read.
If we're here to change the narrative, what's the biggest thing we've got to change?
My mind immediately jumps to education.
What's allowed you to drop the mask?
That's a great question.
I got you. Marisa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We can't wait.
I'm excited.
When we first started making a list of people to film for this, you were on it. And 24 hours ago, you weren't even supposed to be filming today. How ADHD is that?
It is.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here, John and Phil.
Where to start? I think the entrepreneur side of things, we met through that kind of ecosystem. You are so known within that, as well as then the ADHD advocation. Tell us how that's come to be.
My entrepreneur journey really started because of ADHD, because I turned to matcha kind of as a tool in my kit to help manage with symptoms and help me feel good. So when I moved over to the UK and realized there was no matcha, kind of took to starting my own company to bring it to the UK. And now we're Europe's largest matcha brand, actually the second largest importer of matcha globally behind Starbucks. So it's been a crazy ride, but that's pretty much how I became, I guess, the entrepreneurial and ADHD journeys kind of meshed together.
As you started to talk there, you said you were excited to be here. I'm going to just pick out that word if I can. You're a woman, an entrepreneur, and you have ADHD. And from what I've read and what I know about you, that's not defining you. That just happens to be something that you're proud to talk about. Why are you excited to be here today?
I think that we have a duty to destigmatize what people feel so much shame around. And ADHD, especially because the word deficit is in the clinical kind of diagnosis of ADHD, people feel less than who have it, that something's wrong with them, that they don't function like normal people. But there is no such thing as normal. I've learned that throughout my whole life. There's no such thing as a typical family unit. The show Modern Family has done loads for that, right? So I think the more you speak openly about it and proudly, and you can acknowledge the ways in which it might, I guess, impede your ability to navigate life easily, but you can also embrace the strengths that it gives you. And I think that's really key in changing how we view ADHD as a strength as opposed to only a negative.
I love that, because a key thing I really am focused on at the moment is role models. I'm a dad of two daughters myself, so who are they watching, who they're looking at, particularly when you've got TikTok and social media. And so if you look at how you sit in that space, not just as what you're doing and who you are, but then looking back into kind of what you're trying to give back, how important is that role model kind of role?
I think it means everything. I think of myself as a young girl. I don't recall having very many role models that had ADHD, that were high-powered women, that openly spoke about it. So when I received my diagnosis, I did feel shame and deficient, and that something was wrong with me. I had always kind of felt like that, and putting a label on it, whilst it helped, I guess, it helped me acknowledge what it was, and thus I was able to maybe manage it better. It also just it didn't exactly make me feel great. And there were no people really owning it or discussing, yeah, I have this, but and it doesn't really define me. I'm able to achieve so much. So I'd like to be that role model for people and show that it doesn't need to be viewed as something that I don't want to say you victimize yourself for it, but it's that the world kind of victimizes you and views you as different. So
I love that because you've embraced it, and we were talking off camera about the fact that it breaks your heart when parents will say that their kids have just been diagnosed, and then they go, "Oh, what do we do now?" And so on. And you're there going, "Oh my God, we know probably that the majority of the entrepreneurs and people successful in business are actually ADHD, more than likely." So it's flipping that whole narrative.
absolutely.
What made you go and get your diagnosis then?
Yeah, it might be helpful context to take it back a little bit further, because I know a lot of women now, just due to how ADHD has been diagnosed historically, were going undiagnosed for years and masking their symptoms and then receiving diagnoses way later in life. Unlike those women, I was diagnosed when I was 16, and it was after years of weekly therapy sessions with a psychiatrist. So I grew up in New York, and I was very fortunate to have a degree of financial privilege. But what was kind of, I guess, bereft in my life was emotional stability. So a lot of mental health challenges have kind of afflicted my family, and my parents are both just not really in the picture. And my grandparents had the wherewithal to say, Marisa should probably start going to a therapist or a psychiatrist when I was 12. As someone who was kind of predisposed to developing potentially certain conditions. So I loved it, by the way. I thought it was the most fun that you could have after school as a kid. So for 4 years, I was going to weekly, psychiatry sessions. And I remember it got to a point where I remember the feeling. I felt like my brain could not sit still. And it wasn't, my symptoms never manifested themselves in hyperactivity, or what you would typically
Physical hyperactivity.
Exactly. It was really mostly mental, and it would result in severe overwhelm leading to mental paralysis. I could not function. And it actually would then manifest into symptoms of depression, because I felt this degree of ambition that I also simultaneously felt totally unmotivated or unprepared to execute on, and did not know what to do. It was really, it was a very challenging feeling, I recall. And that is probably at the point where my psychiatrist said, I knew from the start of working with you that you have ADHD, but we've been working on coping mechanisms that we could, implement to try to manage it, maybe without the proper diagnosis or medication. And when I was 16, that's when she said, why don't we try medication now? Because that was really when it was starting to get I couldn't manage it on my own. And the tools that we had previously implemented were no longer working.
May I ask what it was you weren't managing? Because we're going to switch into the positives very quickly.
Yeah.
We set the foundation, the bedrock
Mm-hmm.
for change. What was it you weren't managing?
It's a great question. It was schoolwork. And that's, you laugh because I think we all can agree that the education system has not really been designed to deal with any sort of neurodivergence. It was created by neurotypical people for neurotypical people.
One size fits all.
Exactly. And as opposed to strengths-based learning, where you get an A in maths, so you double down in maths, they'd love to point out your weaknesses and flaws and take your D to a B in science, right? So I was finding that process incredibly challenging.
So you got your diagnosis. I imagine a illuminative moment at the age of 16. The words we hear in feedback back in the clinic is validation, understood, listened to, heard for the first time, those kind of things. Look at the smile on your face. You're empathizing with yourself at this point, aren't you? What was that like for you then, that moment when you started to understand yourself a bit more?
I think humans generally, it's a lifelong challenge of struggling with identity. But if you can put some kind of clear words or just some sort of reason as to why you might be feeling certain things, it just makes you no longer feel crazy. You no longer feel like you're broken, because there is some sort of rationale behind why you might be acting that way, why you might be feeling certain emotions. So yes, validation is the exact word that I would use. I do remember, though, the feeling of feeling a deficit, though, at the same time, because of the actual word within the diagnosis.
Yeah.
So that didn't feel so great, but it did feel good knowing that there were other tools we could try. There were other types of support that I could get. And I love the concept of body doubling. I think that has been a really key strategy for me in managing everything from work to cleaning my house, right? So I remember just feeling like, finally, I know what's happening to my body. It's the same thing if you have a physical illness, right? And you are constantly feeling fatigued or unwell, and you go to doctors, but they can't tell you what's wrong with you. And you start to think, am I going crazy? Have I just made this up in my head? So that's why, and sometimes, even if the diagnosis is bad, people still feel a sense of gratitude for the diagnosis because it makes sense.
Yeah, and if I can, you talked about the deficit word in the label. We picked this up time and time again, and I think we'll play with this forever. The inappropriate nature of the label.
Yeah,
it's amazing how damaging it is, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Understanding, but then actually realizing the label means deficit, and you're like,
yeah,
it's a negative.
No matter how validated you feel, there's still that. Hang on, I've not got something. There is something wrong. And of course, in the professional world of ADHD now, we're starting to want to articulate emotional dysregulation, sensitivity to rejection, though, which are greater, perhaps, is the impact of an impairment, for want of a word, on somebody than not being able to focus all the time. Those things manifest, but it's the impact of those. The outcome of all of that is things like, I'm just going to lose my shit, and I'm going to lose it really quickly, or I feel really left out, let down, and I cannot tolerate not being part of this or being put down again. Was that you?
Absolutely. Is. I still identify with those feelings for sure. And it's interesting in the workplace. It's a really peculiar context to be managing those feelings in, because you have to one degree, be really professional. But at the same time, you do end up taking things quite personally at times. And there's still, to this day, I'm laughing because I can recall a moment yesterday when my two co-founders were having a meeting about something, and I wasn't in the room. And I was like, what are you talking about without me? What do you mean? I want to know what's happening. And this constant feeling of needing to be seen or involved or tied into what's happening. I do, to some degree, I would imagine that is how most co-founders or founders feel, because it is their business at the end of the day, so they want to know what's going on. But I think I personalize it a bit more than others.
Yeah.
But it's navigating ADHD in the workplace is something that I am quite passionate about, and I think is highly misunderstood and unfortunately stigmatized. And in thinking about what I wanted to discuss today with the two of you, this topic is something I'm really passionate about, because there have been so many occasions where we will have an interview with a potential candidate. Teddy and Levi are my two co-founders. Levi is my husband, and Teddy's my best friend from college, and now my brother-in-law. He was also my housemate up until about 6 months ago, because my husband and I had just gotten married, and we decided maybe it's about time we kick your brother out of the house, and he can live on his own. But I digress. So they were raised in a very traditionally British household, and I'm obsessed with their family. I feel so grateful to have kind of I really think I won the jackpot with my in-laws. I love them so much. But I will say that they definitely don't talk about a lot of things, like any classic British household of you're quiet about what's wrong in the family, and you only focus on the positives, and kind of this perception of having like a perfect family, right? And they are to a lot, to their credit, I will say they have done a great job with their kids and they live a really lovely life. But the one thing that I will say is that, and that I struggled with a lot, is with the kind of EQ development of my husband and getting him to develop empathy for people that have different kind of brains to them, right? And they just function differently. So there have been so many times when we have interviews with potential candidates, and these candidates are incredible. They have so much value to bring. They're specialized in their fields. But after the interviews, Teddy and Levi, the first thing they'll say is, did you see how much he interrupted? He was interrupting me every other sentence. And I am sitting there, firstly, I didn't have a negative perception of the interview. I thought it went so well. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I express this and I go, I think he was just really excited about what you were saying. Exactly.
Can't contain it.
Yeah. And it's like this feeling of, oh my gosh, yes, I can completely relate to that. And I'm so fired up about this project. And I want to join the team. And I'm like, I see that as a strength, because that for me signals passion. And I go, we can work on ways with him to develop the urge, right? You can try to embrace some more mindfulness and think, okay, I'm trying to keep track of what I want to say right now after this, but I'm going to wait, because the temptation, you can't resist sometimes, right? Especially in an interview context when you're trying to show that you are the person for the role. So I end up becoming a lot of the time the advocate. And I go, I definitely think to some degree that he might have ADHD. He didn't say that, but I definitely...
You recognize empathy.
Exactly. And that's what I think we all just need to have, a more empathetic approach. And I sometimes think managers are so quick, especially if they hear ADHD, they think disorganized, disruptive, and
unable,
right? Or disgruntled.
Amazing. The articulation there is beautiful. And there's so many people that have probably left an interview and been really hard on themselves, going, oh, I know I interrupted him. I know I shouldn't have said that. And so on, because of the passion. And that is what potentially that person heard and has thought. Whereas you're looking at it, this person's like a cork coming out of the bottle and so on. And if you even said I could shape, I can help, I can mold, put coping mechanisms, and then harness that. And that probably comes back to this kind of almost entrepreneurial conversation. And also you wanting to champion and be an ADHD advocate. What are you doing, and what more can you do and can we do to make this more aware to people that it is something you can work with and achieve incredible things?
I love that question. And that is genuine. That is the key. It's like, how can we harness the energy and focus on the strengths? I think this could be unpopular, but I think really the first step is it starts with yourself, and you have to have some degree of kind of self-awareness and self-acknowledgement of your strengths and an understanding. And that's why diagnoses are so helpful, because you can start to understand yourself a little bit better and understand your ways of working. So one thing I'm really passionate about is, which we have now started implementing across the team, is a ways of working doc, where we try to understand with every single person who joins us, how can we get the best out of you? What is your preferred method of communication? Do you like to work in silence, or do you like to work collaboratively? Are you someone that likes to first think about a problem really deeply and then convene, or do you want to chat openly about ideas first? Do you like to be tapped on the shoulder if we need you, or do you want it to be pinged, and maybe if you don't answer within an hour, we can come to you, right? I think it is just so important to be able to advocate for yourself and what you need to get the best out of you in a workplace. Otherwise, your managers can't read your brain, right? They can't mind read. So I think it's all about expectation management and really setting those expectations from both sides.
I love that, because there's you mentioned your co-founders. You think about school education, it's been set at one size, but it's all which rolls into the workplace.
Yeah, it
And
does.
it's not just you having that awareness and understanding, it's the people around you. And whether that means you've got to combine, and those people have actually got to have, you said your husband's EQ has grown huge because he is learning, and it's a relation that develops. It doesn't feel like that's necessarily a marriage, literally, let alone in business relationships. It's, almost like people are quite dismissive, like, oh, that's what he does, she does, and it's annoying to them. Actually, the skill sets combining are formidable because I know probably our relationship, I know that I can interrupt and but you're steady, you're, kind of someone that's coming from a different level. Just concentrate on that, or just do this. And that's where the relationships work really well. That feels like something needs to be talked about more.
I'm going to pull out a bit of what you said there. We had a big visitor into work the day before yesterday, and sat in the boardroom, the meeting room, he and I chatting away, and somebody needed to get in the room to join us, and one of my junior manager, but younger, joined us to let that person in, and I introduced her. I said, tell David what you do. Yeah, well, I do this and blah blah blah, and I'm the master of Zendesk, which is the which is the inbound calls, emails, and what handling. She says, and she's a guru with this. I said, and she's neurospicy. I says, what else do you do? She says, oh, I do this and I do the. I said, what else do you do? She says, oh, I teach on the academy. What do you teach on the academy? I teach about values. And my hero was Jordan Wiley, and I've read his book. And when I met Jordan, I thought everything in my life. And all we were doing there was bringing out her strengths and allowing her to explore her strengths in front of people that she was like that. Yeah. And if work can do that, without a doubt, she'll have gone home, said to her partner and her kids, I had this great day at work.
She felt seen.
Absolutely.
Given a chance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you're talking about that in the workplace, we kind of structure things, don't we? Here's your job description. That tells you what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And not many people who are neurodiverse, not many people who aren't, will say, well, if we flip that a little bit, I could do that bit really, really well. That bit I'm going to fail at. And if you ask me to communicate in that way, that's going to give me some challenges. We don't create the opportunity for that dialogue very often, do we?
No.
And what I've just heard you say is, let's start creating that opportunity for that dialogue.
Absolutely.
And if that's the part of that job that you can do, in this 20 people, there'll be someone else who can do the part that you can't do, but doesn't want to do the part that you want to do. And let's rip up the job description and let's go about this in a person-centered way. And that's not actually, when you boil it down, about neurodiversity, is it? That's just about playing to strengths.
Exactly.
And just being right by people.
Absolutely.
And
I'll give you an example with myself, because one of my, I would say, something I'm not as great at is task switching. And that is why I always say I wasn't built for this generation, because I'm a bad texter and I'm a bad emailer, because I feel so overwhelmed when I'm constantly getting pinged, and I feel it's not on my own terms, and I'm struggling to manage what I'm doing right now and then focus as well on answering a message. And I have a lot of perfectionist tendencies as well, and that plays into that for sure. But instead of really kind of criticizing myself all the time, because that's what I would be doing, I recognized, okay, I am actually not the best person to be in a sales role, because I would be constantly having to manage the inbound and outbound of requests and, people wanting to connect and discuss opportunities together. I said, I'm actually not good at that. I'm going to let other people who are better at communicating, and because I can sell very well in person, but I can't manage the comms that come afterwards. So I have kind of relegated myself more to a creative role, which requires a lot of strategic thinking, because it's not just the marketing or the brand that I'm doing, but it's looking across the entire business. But it doesn't involve as much outside communication. And that's also why we have brought in Chloe, my incredible assistant, because I know that is not one of my strengths. And as opposed to constantly feeling so much shame around the fact that I can't perform to the level that my co-founders do in that specific area, and being upset with myself for having that deficiency, I've thought, you know what, I'm going to own it. And I'm also going to recognize where we can put resource to help me there. And that's exactly what we also do with the rest of the team. So we'll say exactly what you said in the job description. This is the level of expectation that we have. If we have a priority customer, we expect a response to be sent, and they email you. We expect a response within the hour, right? And we have had times when people have said, I can't do that. I can't meet that level of expectation, but what I can do is this. And we go, great. So maybe this role isn't good for you, but actually we want to put you in this role. So
whereas other people might have masked that, and then they get caught out, or they're super stressed and they miss the opportunities, deadlines and so on, because they're not actually sharing enough of the information that allows you to work with it.
Exactly. And I think I'm really proud to create a workplace where, because I'm so open about ADHD and the way that I employ it as a strength and a tool in my life and in my work, people in interview settings are super open about it as well. And that just actually makes it easier for us as managers, and we want to get the best out of people, right? In a workplace, I think you sometimes forget you're dealing with human beings. These aren't just cogs in a machine. So, I think that if more corporate environments adopted this mentality, as opposed to just doing, we got phone booths, soundproof phone booths, so you can focus in there. Like, instead of just, come on, that's just so surface. You have to go deeper.
But this is the entrepreneurial bit, isn't it? A lot of what you're talking about there is, once businesses get bigger or already established, they're in their lanes. This is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. You're coming in, look at the way you just described Chloe, your assistant, who's sitting over there. You recognized it, you embraced it, and now you're thriving. It's absolute proof that when you make those changes and you implement changes that are innovative, which is all part of, it's working.
What's allowed you to drop the mask?
That's a great question.
That got you.
I think it's a confluence of factors. So I'm an only child, and coming from a family where my parents are not, you wouldn't expect them to be traditional parents, right? And having to have a high degree of independence and constantly trying to pursue, because I have a chip on my shoulder, like a lot of people and most entrepreneurs, and then going to an Ivy League school where I was constantly feeling like I had imposter syndrome, and again, perfectionist tendencies coming through. I had to be great, and then going into finance, which didn't help. And I definitely was struggling through all of that mentally quite a lot. So bouts of depression all the way through, and which we know is comorbid with ADHD and anxiety. And I just think over the past 4 years of building this company, it has been the most like illuminating experience for me, just in my own personal growth journey of understanding who I am, what I want in life, how to get the best out of me. What do I really want? And can I be real for a second? I just don't have the energy or the time to be someone I'm not. And I've just said, kind of, screw it, because life is so short. Anything can happen, and I just don't want to waste time or energy masking who I really am. So I embrace it, and it manifests itself in like quirky ways. And I actually think it makes me more fun and different. And
it liberates you.
Yeah, it's just, I'm such a happier version of myself. But I also will acknowledge that there is privilege there, because I am in a position where I can help co-create this environment that I'm constantly in,
Yes,
as in work. And I'm not having to kind of, I guess, shape shift into what someone else needs or wants of me. I have an accepting partner. I have a really accepting family. I have friends who don't put pressure on me, which is absolutely key. I think a lot of people with ADHD or any sort of neurodivergence should have low maintenance friends because it's already hard enough dealing with life. So it's, again, expectation. And I try my best, and I'm not great at it all the time, but I really try my best at managing expectations. I will try to tell my friends, guys, this is going to be a crazy few months. If you don't hear from me, know that I'm alive and I love you, but I will call you in 3 months.
I love that because there's so much self-awareness there, so much maturity and perspective, which I think is incredibly inspiring for anyone that's watching or listening that is masking and is not being themselves. And your energy is phenomenal, and the passion you put into it. And I think the key as well is you're making conscious choices. You mentioned your partner. You mentioned you preempt people, hey, this is how it might be. It's instantly giving people knowledge that otherwise would be masking. I think it's so valuable to share that.
The brain will always jump to a conclusion when it doesn't have enough information. So if you have a first interaction with someone and let's say they're constantly interrupting you and they're not really paying, you can see them losing focus during the conversation. You see their brain is elsewhere. You would probably just think they're rude, right? You'd probably think, oh, they're not interested. Or you'd probably internalize that and say, oh, I'm not good enough to be...
It'd be a judgment.
Yeah, you're making a judgment.
Yeah.
But if that person were to maybe start that conversation out with saying, hey, I have ADHD, or this is what's happening in my life, I just need you to know. That's why I'm very open about my mental and physical health struggles with my team, which again, might not be a popular opinion amongst the professional sphere, but I think it's so important because you need to know what's going on with me to understand if am I going to be at my A game that day? Am I at 80%? Am I at 50%? And where do you need to pick up if I'm not going to be there, right? And when I tell you, my team appreciate it. They thank me for telling them. And I don't feel weird about it. I used to think, ooh, am I being inappropriate? Maybe I shouldn't share that I have this health problem going on. But I've said, again, life's too short. I want people to know around me. If I'm working so closely with them, they should know.
So we're running out of time.
Okay.
Sadly, because this could go on and add value and more value. I'm going to ask you one question to wrap up. That question is, if we're here to change the narrative, what's the biggest thing we've got to change?
My mind immediately jumps to education. So so that's two-part. One is the education system. So we can actually maybe adopt a way that we can really lead with strengths-based learning and not make people feel that they are less than because they are just simply uninterested and not motivated by a particular subject. And if they are thriving in one area, let's lean in there and let's make them incredible there then. That's one area. That's education in the education system. And then education in terms of the different types of neurodivergence. And there's no one size fits all description, right? And people will often meet me and they go, ooh, you don't really seem ADHD because maybe I'm not tapping my foot or I'm sitting still, but they can't see what's happening in my mind.
No.
So just educating people on one, how we can be a more empathetic society as well to people that are different to us, because different isn't bad. In fact, there is so much evidence proving that diverse teams in the workplace actually produce, unparalleled outcomes financially and, socially. So I just think if we all were a bit more tolerant, a bit more empathetic to others and ourselves, then we would have a much happier population.
Marisa, thank you.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
And to literally wrap up, I think we knew this is more than just a conversation on camera. This is a movement. This is an ecosystem, a community bringing people together. And we would love to bring you into everything we're trying to do to change that narrative.
We're going to do it. I'm very excited.
Us too.
This is an unstoppable team.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Brilliant.
much.
Thank you.
It's Phil and John.